Okay, let's talk about our agenda today. Some of the tips that I think are the most important is join types. They are really important in terms of data accuracy and getting the right data for what you're looking for. I often see mistakes here for novice developers and developers, and it often makes the end user very mad. It makes them big mad. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit, and then we're going to talk about permissions and BAQ functionality. We're also going to talk about performance considerations. We want it to run faster. It's usually what you hear, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Parameter options and considerations. Then we're going to talk about calculated fields, tips, and the most used expressions. And then we're going to talk about just a couple other smart practices that are not part of these other categories. Okay, let's talk about join types first. Be really cautious when joining tables. So you can filter or inappropriately or add duplicates just from your join. So I know that there's table criteria that filters things out, but your join can actually filter out rows, and it can also duplicate rows. It's often where I see problems in data. It's often where I see problems in reports. Always start with a table that has uniquely the data that you're starting with. So if you are wanting to do an employee scorecard and you only want as many rows as you have employees, make sure you know how many rows are in the employee table of active employees that you actually want to use. Know that how many rows you have, so that when you're done with your report, you still only have that many rows. That'll keep every join, every filter, everything you do, you'll know at the end, oh, I still have all of my employees there. I still have all my data there. Know that if you do join and you're joining on a table that's going to duplicate employees, say you're joining to labor detail, if you do a join from employee to labor detail, you're going to have multiple labor detail records per employee. Maybe you wanted that. Maybe more rows is exactly what you wanted, and that's okay. If it's expected, it's good. If it's unexpected, it's bad. So just keep that actual row count in mind as you go and as you build. So you can add a distinct qualifier to your query under subquery show details. So that distinct qualifier, it will remove any row duplicates, so you can see if you actually have duplications. And let me pull up so that would be under subqueries. Go to my top level. So it's subqueries, you go to your top level, and you can select distinct. If you do that, press OK. I'm not going to do it because this is actually something I made. If you do that and your row count goes down, then you had duplicates in your query and you need to figure out why it's duplicating, especially if you're summing, because you don't want to do that. Okay, so you can also check, make sure you check for duplicates or unexpected filtering. So a loss of rows or extra duplicated rows before grouping and creating expressions like sums or averages or anything of that nature, because you'll lose visibility into those duplications, and all you'll have is the value that carries the duplicated cost or the duplicated price or whatever it might be. So just make sure before you group that you have your correct data. It's really great to select a test case when you're developing, and this will really help on joins, so that every time you make a change, you know what the output should be. So every time you make a change to your query, you can check that output based on that test case, based on that part, based on that day, based on whatever it is, you know what the output should be. It's always good to have usually a couple, but at least one test case. So also use the output field headers to sort when you bring your tables in. There's certain joins that can filter things. So to make sure data is in there, you can just tap on these headers of your output, because it's the run query element, and you'll see there's no data here for some of the rows. If we were gonna join on finished part, do we have a finished part in every single row? If you have nulls, then you have to decide what you're gonna do about inaccurate or incomplete data. Don't just join before you know. Okay, you can also export to Excel to look at your data. I find some people find that easier. Now, inner join, that is the join that I'd say be the most careful with. It seems to be the one that everybody always uses when they start out. It should not be. And I'll tell you why. If you have a head table and the table you know what you want to do with, Okay, so when you use matching rows, and that's when we do want to do that, which is fine. But when you use matching rows from both, they have to match in both. So if you see here, it's going to be an inner join. So you see it says inner join. It means that that data has to be in both of your tables. So if I try to join, so you can see here that we have a finished part and we have a part rev and some of them are nulls. If I try to join this table to another table and I included part rev, it would just chunk out all of these rows. You may not want that. You may not want these rows to disappear. You may want the ones that have nulls. So when you inner join and you join on, when you inner join and you join on part rev, it's going to remove those rows. You may not want that. So maybe a left outer join, which is just all the rows from your first table, may be a better join so that you don't lose all of the data that you're not looking to lose. Also, what should be there? People think there's stuff that should be there. Make sure there is. Sometimes there is not. Sometimes there's process issues. So there can be missing items. Just always check first before you start joining. All right, let's talk about permissions and BAQ functionality. So there is field level security. This is a company-wide thing. If your company has field level security turned on, everything is going to be slow. Your BAQs are going to be slow. Your reports are going to be slow. Everything in just Epicor in general is going to be slow. It's either on or it's off, and it's at a company level. So you can ask your company if that's on or not. But if things are really slow, it could be that. I would not recommend turning it on. We do not recommend ever turning it on. Also, when you're going through your query, if you want nobody else to be able to see your query, you can unmark shared right here. Then you will only be able to see it. Just make sure that when you search for it, you uncheck shared, because it'll usually default to search to shared things. Also, BAQ security. So you can put security on the BAQ level. That means people will not be able to access this BAQ if they fall within a security group that doesn't include this ID. It's going to be the same as menu items, and anything you put on the security ID here will flow through to the menu item, to the application studio, and to any dashboards. So this might be your first stop to make sure that your security is locking down so that nobody can see it on the other end. Performance considerations. All right, we're going to talk about window functions in a bit, but be careful with window functions and BAQs. They can slow things down crazily. Sometimes you have to use them. They might be the only option you have in terms of what you're trying to create, but just they slow things down, so be careful. Okay, minimize the number of tables joined. That'll always increase your performance. More columns equals slower. So the least amount of columns that you can add, the quicker your queries can be. Just keep it tight. Filter early and often. Filter as much as you can. If you know exactly that it's got to always be the current company, there's some constants here. Current plant, current company, current user, any of those kind of things. If you know that you're going to use that anyways, filter them out right at the BAQ level. Oh, another thing too, if you have a BAQ that is really, really slow and you're on-prem, often moving it to an external BAQ can speed it up. For bombs, a lot of times you have to do that. The true bombs, not just like a part material queried on itself, but with all of the filters and whatnot. They are massive, meaty queries, and so I often have to move them to external BAQs that then get pulled into the system through the external BAQ system. And they're faster because they don't have to go through all the table security when they go out to an external SQL. Also, in terms of performance considerations, often these BAQs are used elsewhere. So like in SSRS reports, in Application Studio, etc. They're all calculating on the BAQ level is going to be the fastest. So if you have calculations, do them at the BAQ level. Do not put them on the report level. Report levels are going to be slower. The one exception is BPMs. Those can be faster, but that's a whole can of worms we aren't going to go into today. So, and then also test every step as you go to see if performance slows down before or after a step. Also know that if you put into an SSRS report, a matrix with calculations on that matrix can be really slow. So that's just another consideration. And then finally, the query execution plan is a good thing to look at to see where your bottlenecks are. So if you can see, I'll pull up, so you can see this little guy running. It's on your BAQ, and you can click that, and it's going to send you a file. You can save it wherever you want. See, I already saved one. And then you have to have SQL to be able to open it because it's a SQL plan. But you can open it in SQL and just by double-clicking it and choosing SQL to open it, and it's going to show you this. So this is going to be your query in how much everything is taking up in terms of time, memory, space, things like that. So this one is going to be, this is my BOM. So obviously the clustered lookup is taking up 72%. So this is my biggest, meatiest item. And if I want to focus on making it faster, I need to focus on that. And that is traditional for recursive queries. They're going to be pretty slow because they're doing a lot. So this can be a great way to look at your thing to determine your query to determine where you might have an issue. Parameters, options and considerations. Know your output before you start designing. Parameters, if you're putting in a dashboard or in an application studio, can be really obnoxious. They're going to pop up every time you rerun the query that the parameter that the output is based on. So I know people have done this in dashboards before, and it can be so annoying that every time you want to rerun the query, you get those parameters popping up or sliding out again. So just that's a consideration to have. You can alter some of this in customization, but they still tend to pop up every time you load. You can, in Application Studio, you can do things on the where clause where it will filter the query before it comes in. That didn't used to be a thing that you can do. So you may not need them. I'd say if it's just on your output and you're putting it into Application Studio as a dashboard, I would say just put it on your where clause. But parameters also, they don't need to be attached to a single field or table. So if you go here, query parameters, you can set them up at the table level, and they can be attached to various or multi subqueries. They could be just on the inner query. They don't have to be on the output. So just so you know about query parameters, they exist here as well. And you'll find sometimes if you delete a table criteria parameter, it'll still get mad at you that you're not inputting the parameter value. You have to also delete it from here because it'll go to the query level. All right, calculated fields, tips, and lists of functions. Okay, so let's first just talk about calculated fields in general. The options they give you in, okay, this is calculated fields. Okay, so they give you options in here, functions. There we go. They give you all sorts of options and operators and functions. This is not the complete list of options you have in BAQs. So they often accept, I haven't seen many SQL functions that do not work in BAQs. So you can just Google SQL functions or SQL expressions and use those in here as well. Just check the syntax and make sure that it's happy before you run it. It's obviously not going to do any like select phrases, delete phrases, anything like that, but the functions where like a window function that it won't show in that list, you can use, and we'll talk about windows later. But there might be extra options out there. Feel free to Google and have some fun. Also, you don't have to use an expression at all, which would be like sum with like the little parentheses. You don't have to use that at all. You can just use operators. You can do one field times another field or one field plus another field. Just keep that in mind. Also, you can do group by, and then all the other fields are calculated fields. So if you have a table that has many rows per employee, but you want to group by day and employee and job, you can do that, and then you can make all your other fields calculated fields where you sum labor hours or you sum earned hours or whatever it might be. So that can be really great for aggregates and then cut down on subqueries and things like that. So now we're going to talk about window functions and date functions. Okay, so window functions. These ones are the ones that that can slow down things, but they are great if you're in a jam, because what they do is like a tiny itty bitty little subquery. So it would be like max job detail operation sequence over partition by, and then here's your fields you partition by, which would be company and job number. And then you would have an order by, or you don't have to have one. And then you name, this one is, you're naming it, but you don't have to, that as max sequence is just for SQL. You wouldn't put that in your BAQ statement. But this is a window function. So it's basically saying, what is the max operation sequence if you group through this whole table that I have, the way it's filtered, if I group by company and job number, what's my max operation sequence, which can be really good if you need to find out, okay, what's the last sequence in here? And I just want to use those rows for a certain thing over here. You can also do row number, which can be good because sometimes you can't use an order by in a subquery. There's certain situations where that happens. So instead, you can have a row number, and then you can filter by criteria is row numbers under this certain, like the 20th row. I only want the 20th, the top 20th, or the top 20 rows. And you can set up your criteria, your condition, and your grouping here and get a row number that you can filter by later. So window functions are great. The over clause is, so what I said, it's the window of rows. So it's essentially what defines that window. Partition by is what groups, so the columns. The order by is the same as normal order by. What is the way that this is going to be sorted? Rows and range. So that's the max up here. You can use ranking functions, aggregate functions, analytic functions. So this part that comes before the over can be row number, it could be rank, it could be dense rank, it could be entile, sum, average, count, min, max, lag, lead. This is really good if you want to know what the preceding row of something was. So what was the operation before this operation? What was the assembly before that assembly? What was the part number? Whatever it might be. So lead and lag are really good. Also first value returns the first row in the window. So these are ones that you add as before the over, but they can be really great. So the most used expressions also are date functions. I've found date functions, everybody wants to know date functions because they want to know how long things happened between certain dates, or they want to cut off certain dates, or they want to group by certain dates. So there's my favorite are date functions. First of all, no intervals when it comes to date functions, and I have that here. So it's year, the y. So anytime you see interval here, it's going to be one of these. The next would be the type. So there's date add, date part, date name, date diff, and this one is the first day of a week, which I found really helpful when you want to group into weeks and things like that. So date add, it adds one interval to the date. So this one, it would be day plus one payroll date. So if I really wanted to move a payroll date, I had somebody that wanted me to put anybody that was second shift on a Sunday, they actually wanted to put them in a Monday. So you add one to a payroll date. Now they have a new date. You can have 1 week, 1 year, 1 month, any of these intervals. Date part, that one is going to be, the output is going to be a decimal or an int. It's an interval and the date. So you can say month and then the date. And so that would be, if it was January, it'd be 1. If it was February 2. So it's going to be a decimal, but it's saying, hey, what's this? What's the part out of the sequence? Okay, date name, that's going to be a text that's going to come out. So it's also going to be interval and date. So if you want to know, I mean, year, it's going to come out as text, but it's still, you could put it as int. This is really good for weekday, the day of the month, day of the year, week, things like that. That's really good. Weekday, that one's really good. So if you want to know what your data is in terms of Sunday, Monday, Saturday, Sunday, things like that, it'd be really great. Date diff, so that would be the time between intervals. I keep saying date, but it's so like days between two dates, but it could be years between two dates, months between two dates, quarters between two dates. So you do the date and then the first date, the interval, and then first date, second date. Output is going to be either a decimal or an int, so it's going to be a value. Okay, and then first date of the week, this one is really great. You know, a lot of people want to know what's that first Sunday, first Monday. It's a Sunday through Saturday is this range, and then this part here you can choose what day represents the week. So you would put in, this one is get date. So you would put your date just in this get date area. And at the end, you can choose to identify this date as being part of a week based on it's Sunday, it's Monday, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, based on what number you put here. It's really great. Use that one a lot. Smart practices, undefined data dictionary. Know where it is. Make sure you have access to it. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about your fields, your tables, everything. So make sure you go here. You look at stuff. What's my table? What's ABT head? What does it do? Here are all my fields. What do those fields do? There might be things in here like it uses the inventory unit of measure versus the sales unit of measure, things like that, which could be really helpful. Also field help. I think I've shown that before, but on this one, field help, well, this one doesn't have any technical details because it's a thing that Calvin added, but it will add little question marks into any form you're in, and it'll tell you what that field is in terms of its data table and the field. Settings to avoid is the cloud multi-tenant. Cross-company and all-company, do not choose those. You will get errors because you do not have access to all companies for cross-companies. So this and this one, be careful with because you are sharing an SQL. So when you do that, it thinks you want to query all the other companies that are on the shared SQL system. So it gets mad. Documentation, best practices. Make sure that your BAQ names are easy to understand what they did and who wrote them and why. Also, subqueries should be named for what they do. So if you're chunking data into a smaller chunk, make sure you name them for what it's doing so you can remember later. Common errors, you need a name and description before you can save a query. So if you go here and you write this all in and everything's fine, you forget a description, you try and save, it'll yell at you. Don't do that. Just put a description in and you're fine. Make sure your BAQ is shared if you want it shared. Otherwise, when you look in the list of BAQs, you might not find it because you have to click that unshared checkbox. So if you ever can't find one, you might have not clicked it shared. Just in the search box, make sure you do unshared. So you unclick that shared checkbox, and then you probably will be able to find it. Multi-company BAQs, owning company error. So if you've created a BAQ in one company and you're trying to change it in another company, you're going to get an error. You have to be in the same company that you created in. You can do a copy. I don't know if in some versions the owning company will change. In other versions, the owning company will not change. So it's best just to keep developing in one company. If you get odd output, like this isn't what my fields are, is your top level correct? If you have multiple queries, it's only going to show that top level. So make sure your top level is correct. And if you're testing, sometimes you can forget to change that top level back. So just keep that in mind. Also, bad SQL statement, error message. The most common places I see this is joins. You'll get this. Unions, intercepts, and accepts when you don't have the same number of fields or matching fields and the matching order of data types, or if you have a syntax error in your calculated field. So I check there first.